What would you do if nature's most fearsome predator made your adventure a nightmare? From a grizzly bear ambushing a couple on horseback to campers fending off a relentless attack in Alaska, these encounters are as terrifying as they are unforgettable. Witness a father and son's harrowing escape, a tourist's fight for survival near a national park in Montana, and hikers narrowly avoiding tragedy in bear country. Join us as we uncover 6 chilling stories of survival and bravery that reveal the untamed dangers of the wild. On July 15, 2023, Sarah Jenkins and Mark Thompson embarked on a horseback riding trip through a national forest in western Wyoming. The couple, both in their late 20s, shared a deep love for the outdoors and often explored wilderness trails during their weekends. Sarah, an elementary school teacher, had grown up in Wyoming and spent much of her childhood horseback riding across the region's vast landscapes. Originally from Colorado, Mark worked as an environmental consultant and often accompanied Sarah on her adventures, learning to ride and appreciate the area's rugged beauty. This particular afternoon was idyllic. The sun shone brightly, and a gentle breeze rustled the trees as the couple guided their horses along a trail that meandered through the forest. They chose this path because it was known for its stunning views and occasional sightings of deer and elk. Sarah rode a chestnut mare named Bella, while Mark was on a sturdy black gelding named Rocky. The couple enjoyed the serenity of the forest, and the soft crunch of hooves on the trail added rhythm to their journey. As they rode deeper into the wilderness, the trail narrowed, flanked by dense undergrowth on either side. The couple chatted quietly, unaware they were venturing close to a grizzly bear's territory. The forest was alive with sounds, from birds chirping to the distant rustle of leaves, but neither Sarah nor Mark suspected any danger. As they rounded a bend in the trail, Bella suddenly stopped, her ears pricked forward. Sensing the horse's unease, Sarah tried to calm her, but a massive grizzly bear burst out of the underbrush before she could react. The bear, likely startled by the horses, stood on its hind legs, growling loudly. The sudden appearance of the predator sent both horses into a frenzy. The mare reared up before Sarah could steady Bella, throwing her off the saddle. Sarah landed hard on the rocky ground, bruising her side and scraping her arms. Mark managed to keep his seat on Rocky, but his heart raced as he watched the bear charge toward Sarah. Bella bolted into the trees, leaving Sarah vulnerable on the trail. The bear lunged at Sarah, its massive frame towering over her as she tried to scramble away. Its claws raked across her leg, leaving deep gashes as she screamed in pain. Desperate to protect her, Mark spurred Rocky forward, positioning the horse between Sarah and the bear. He waved his arms and shouted, trying to divert the bear's attention. The grizzly turned toward Mark, its growls echoing through the forest. Sensing the danger, Rocky stomped and snorted, but the bear remained undeterred. Mark grabbed a branch from the ground, waving it frantically to fend off the animal. The distraction gave Sarah enough time to crawl a few feet away, clutching her injured leg as blood seeped through her jeans. The bear swiped at Mark's horse, grazing Rocky's side with its claws. The gelding reared up, forcing the bear to back off momentarily. Mark took the opportunity to yell at Sarah to move further away. Her leg injury made it nearly impossible for her to stand, and she crawled slowly toward the cover of a fallen tree. The bear's attention shifted back to Sarah as it paced the trail, growling and sniffing the air. Mark knew he had to act quickly to keep the predator from attacking again. His mind raced as he prepared to risk everything to protect Sarah. Mark's adrenaline surged as the grizzly turned its focus back to Sarah, who was still struggling to move further away. Her leg injury, combined with her bruises, made her movements slow and excruciatingly painful. The bear growled loudly, inching closer, its heavy paws crunching against the gravel path. Mark knew he needed to act decisively. He urged Rocky forward again, positioning the horse between the bear and Sarah. The gelding's loud snorts and stomping hooves momentarily distracted the bear. Mark grabbed another sturdy branch from the ground and waved it aggressively, shouting to scare the predator. The bear paused, clearly agitated but momentarily unsure of its next move. Sarah, still clutching her bleeding leg, managed to drag herself behind the fallen tree for cover. The deep gashes on her leg continued to bleed heavily, soaking her jeans and making her dizzy from blood loss. She fought to stay conscious, knowing Mark was risking his life to protect her. The bear finally retreated into the underbrush, but Mark knew it wasn't gone for good. He quickly dismounted Rocky and rushed to Sarah's side. Surveying her injuries, he realized the situation was critical. Her leg wounds were severe, and her pale complexion showed signs of shock. He tore strips of fabric from his shirt to create a makeshift bandage, tying it tightly around her leg to slow the bleeding. Mark gently helped Sarah onto his horse, ensuring she was securely seated in the saddle. Although Rocky had been injured earlier, the resilient horse stood steady, almost as if he understood the moment's gravity. With reins in hand, Mark led them into the forest, his senses on high alert for any sign of danger. Every rustling leaf and snapping twig sent a jolt of adrenaline through him, but he kept moving forward, resolute in their mission to reach safety before the bear could return. Mark noticed movement in the distance as they approached the main trail. The sounds of the commotion alerted a group of hikers who appeared. One of them carried a satellite phone and immediately called for help. Relief washed over Mark as the hikers assisted in keeping Sarah stable while they waited for the rescue team to arrive. When the helicopter finally landed in a clearing, paramedics rushed to Sarah's side. Her injuries required immediate attention, and she was airlifted to the nearest hospital. Mark stayed behind to ensure Rocky was safely cared for before being transported to reunite with Sarah. The following days were filled with recovery and reflection. Sarah underwent surgery to repair the damage to her leg, and doctors confirmed that she would need weeks of physical therapy. The scars on her leg would be a permanent reminder of the harrowing encounter. Despite the trauma, she remained optimistic, grateful to be alive, and deeply thankful for Mark's courage. Though physically unharmed, Mark struggled with the emotional toll of the incident. The image of the bear charging at Sarah haunted him, but he found solace in knowing he had done everything possible to protect her. Their bond grew stronger as they supported each other through the recovery process. The attack sparked widespread discussions in their community about the risks of outdoor activities in bear-populated areas. Local wildlife officials emphasized the importance of carrying bear spray, avoiding known bear territories, and staying vigilant during wilderness excursions. Sarah and Mark, now advocates for wilderness safety, shared their story to raise awareness about the dangers and unpredictability of wildlife encounters. While the scars of the attack remained, the couple found strength in their survival. The experience deepened their appreciation for life and each other, turning a near tragedy into a powerful story of resilience and love. On August 12, 2023, Mike Henderson, a 42-year-old mechanical engineer from Grand Rapids, Michigan, decided to take his 12-year-old son, Luke, on a weekend camping trip to a national forest in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Mike, an avid outdoorsman, cherished moments spent in nature and wanted to pass his love for the wilderness to Luke. The trip was meant to be a bonding experience and an opportunity for Luke to learn survival skills and appreciate the beauty of the natural world. An energetic and curious boy, Luke had been looking forward to the trip for weeks. After a school project on Michigan's ecosystems, he had recently developed an interest in hiking and wildlife. Armed with a new backpack and a guidebook on local animals, he was eager to explore the forest trails with his father. Their chosen campsite was nestled near a small stream, surrounded by towering pines and the gentle rustling of leaves. The location was serene, far from the busy city life they were accustomed to. Mike had meticulously planned the trip, packing a sturdy tent, food supplies, and safety equipment, including a bear spray canister. They spent their first evening setting up camp, roasting marshmallows, and sharing stories under the starlit sky. The following morning, the father and son duo explored one of the forest's well-known trails. Luke led the way, excitedly pointing out birds and identifying trees from his guidebook. Mike walked behind him, proud of his son's enthusiasm and attentiveness. The trail meandered through dense foliage, with occasional clearings offering glimpses of sunlit meadows. As they ventured deeper into the woods, the atmosphere grew quieter. The rustling of leaves and birds chirping seemed to fade, replaced by an eerie stillness. Luke paused, noticing tracks on the trail that his guidebook identified as bear prints. Mike reassured him that black bears were usually timid and avoided humans. They continued walking, their conversation lighthearted, but both remained vigilant. Suddenly, the calm was shattered by a loud rustling in the underbrush. Before they could react, a large black bear emerged onto the trail, its dark eyes fixed on them. Probably startled by their presence, the bear stood motionless momentarily before charging toward them. Luke froze in fear as the massive animal closed the distance. Mike shouted for Luke to run, but the bear reached him first, knocking him to the ground. The force of the impact sent Luke sprawling, his guidebook and backpack scattering across the trail. The bear's claws grazed his arm, leaving shallow cuts as he tried to shield himself. Acting instinctually, Mike grabbed a large rock and hurled it at the bear, hitting it on the shoulder. The bear then turned its attention to Mike and growled loudly. The bear swiped at Mike, its claws raking across his side, causing sharp pain and drawing blood. Despite the injury, Mike managed to distract the bear long enough for Luke to crawl away from its immediate reach. Mike's heart pounded as he tried to focus through the sharp pain in his side. The gashes from the bear's claws stung with every movement, but adrenaline kept him going. He waved his arms and shouted, hoping to keep the bear's attention away from Luke, who was crawling toward the ravine a few feet away. The bear hesitated, its head swiveling between the two figures before growling deeply and stepping forward. Luke reached the ravine's edge, his injured arm trembling as he clutched at the roots to steady himself. The shallow cuts on his arm bled lightly but were enough to sap his strength. He looked back to see his father gripping another rock, poised to defend them. The sight of Mike standing his ground gave Luke the strength to keep moving. Mike hurled the second rock, this time hitting the bear's chest. The animal flinched, giving him a critical moment to retreat toward the ravine where Luke was waiting. The bear's growl grew louder, but it didn't follow immediately, as if trying to decide whether to pursue it. Mike reached the ravine's edge and quickly helped Luke down, ignoring the burning pain in his side. Together, they scrambled into the gully, finding temporary refuge beneath a cluster of fallen trees. The bear appeared at the edge, peering down at them with piercing eyes. Its growls echoed through the ravine, but it didn't descend. Mike clutched a broken branch, prepared to fight if the animal came closer. Minutes felt like hours as the bear circled the ravine, sniffing the air. Eventually, it turned and retreated into the forest, leaving Mike and Luke trembling with relief. The gully provided them temporary safety, but their ordeal was far from over. Mike's side continued to bleed, and he knew they needed medical attention soon. He tore a strip from his shirt to wrap around the wound, applying pressure to slow the bleeding. Luke, though shaken, helped his father secure the makeshift bandage. With the bear gone, they began slowly climbing out of the ravine. Mike leaned heavily on Luke, their progress hindered by their injuries and the uneven terrain. The forest seemed eerily quiet, as if it were holding its breath after the chaos. After what felt like hours, they reached the main trail. A group of hikers appeared in the distance, drawn by the sounds of their earlier struggle. One carried a first aid kit and quickly attended to Mike's wounds. Another hiker used a satellite phone to call for help, and within an hour, park rangers arrived. The rangers transported Mike and Luke to a nearby medical facility where their injuries were treated. Mike's side required stitches, and Luke's arm was bandaged to prevent infection. Both were declared stable, with no life-threatening damage. The ordeal left them physically and emotionally exhausted, but they were grateful to be alive. In the following days, the story of their encounter spread through the community, sparking discussions about the importance of wilderness safety. Park officials issued warnings about increased bear activity, urging visitors to carry bear spray and avoid traveling alone in remote areas. For Mike and Luke, the experience strengthened their bond and taught them the value of preparation and resilience. Despite the fear and pain, they vowed to continue exploring the outdoors, now with a deeper respect for nature's unpredictable power. On July 15, 2023, David and Rachel Parker, a couple from Denver, Colorado, set out on what they thought would be a memorable summer adventure in a national park in northwestern Montana. David, 39, was a history professor with a passion for nature photography, and Rachel, 37, was an elementary school teacher who loved hiking and exploring new trails. They had been married for 10 years and shared a deep appreciation for the outdoors. This trip was their way of celebrating their anniversary while reconnecting with the natural world. The couple meticulously planned their hike, choosing a popular trail for its scenic views and wildlife. David carried a high-end camera, eager to capture the park's rugged beauty, while Rachel packed snacks and water to keep them fueled for the journey. Both wore sturdy hiking boots and lightweight backpacks filled with essentials. The morning was perfect, clear skies, a gentle breeze, and birds chirping in the distance. They felt at ease, unaware of the danger that awaited them. The trail wound through dense forests and open meadows, offering breathtaking views of snow-capped peaks and crystal-clear lakes. Rachel led the way, pointing out wildflowers and occasionally admiring the scenery. David often stopped to take pictures, falling behind as he adjusted his camera settings to capture the perfect shot. The couple's laughter and conversation filled the air, a stark contrast to the stillness of the wilderness. As they ventured deeper into the park, they came across a secluded area near a stream shaded by towering pines. It was the ideal spot for a quick break, and David suggested taking some photos by the water. Rachel agreed, and they stepped off the main trail, unaware they were entering Grizzly territory. David set up his camera on a tripod, while Rachel explored the surrounding area, marveling at the beauty of the untouched landscape. The tranquility was shattered when a rustling sound came from the underbrush. Rachel froze, her heart racing, as she spotted a massive grizzly bear emerging from the thicket. Startled by their presence, the The bear stood on its hind legs, its dark eyes locking onto the couple. David quickly grabbed his camera, thinking he could capture a rare wildlife moment, but the bear's growl sent a chilling warning. Rachel instinctively backed away, urging David to do the same, but David focused on adjusting his lens and moved closer to get a better angle. The bear's growl grew louder, and within seconds it charged. David barely had time to react as the bear swiftly closed the distance. The bear knocked him to the ground, its powerful claws tearing into his back, causing deep lacerations. Rachel screamed, dropping her backpack as she ran toward the trail, desperate to find help. Rachel's footsteps echoed in her ears as she sprinted toward the trail, her mind racing with fear and panic. Behind her, she could still hear the growls and roars of the bear, mixed with David's cries of pain. She glanced back briefly, only to see the massive creature looming over David, who was struggling beneath its weight. The bear's claws continued to rake across his back and arms, leaving deep wounds as he tried to shield himself. Desperate for help, Rachel pushed herself harder, her legs trembling from exhaustion and adrenaline. Rachel spotted a group of hikers a few hundred yards down the trail. She waved her arms, shouting to get their attention. The group, alarmed by her frantic state, immediately grabbed their bear spray and ran toward the sounds of the attack. Rachel collapsed onto the ground, gasping for breath as she pointed them in the right direction. The hikers arrived just as the bear was preparing to strike again. They quickly formed a line, aiming their bear spray at the animal. The first burst of the spray was missed due to the wind, but the second shot hit the bear directly in the face. Stunned and disoriented, the bear growled one final time before retreating into the dense forest. The hikers cautiously approached David, who lay motionless on the ground. David was alive but severely injured. His back and arms were covered in deep lacerations, and his breathing was shallow from the trauma. One of the hikers, a nurse, immediately began administering first aid, using a clean shirt to apply pressure to the wounds and slow the bleeding. Another hiker used their satellite phone to call for emergency assistance. Within 30 minutes, a rescue helicopter arrived, guided by the group's bright clothing and frantic waving. Paramedics carefully lifted David onto a stretcher and secured him in the helicopter. Rachel climbed aboard, holding David's hand as they were airlifted to the nearest hospital. Doctors at the hospital worked tirelessly to stabilize David. He required surgery to repair torn muscles and deep wounds, and he lost a significant amount of blood. Despite the severity of his injuries, David was declared stable after several hours in the operating room. The incident sparked widespread attention, with park officials stating the importance of staying on marked trails and carrying proper safety equipment. New policies were implemented to limit access to areas with high bear activity, and educational programs were launched to teach visitors how to navigate the wilderness safely. For David and Rachel, the attack was a life-altering event. David faced a long recovery process, both physically and emotionally, but he remained grateful to be alive. Rachel, who had acted swiftly to get help, became an advocate for wildlife safety, sharing their story to raise awareness. The couple, though shaken, found strength in each other as they began to heal from the traumatic experience. On August 12, 2023, 4 friends from Seattle, Lisa Howard, Ben Carter, Mark Davis, and Julia Thompson, set out on a long-planned camping adventure to Alaska's remote Kenai Peninsula. This trip was their way of escaping the stress of their daily lives and reconnecting with nature. Lisa, 27, a school teacher, was the group planner. She meticulously researched the trails and campgrounds. Ben, 29, a firefighter, was the group's protector, always ready to handle emergencies. Mark, 28, a software engineer, loved adventure but often underestimated risks. Julia, 26, a nurse, was the calm presence who kept everyone grounded. The group arrived at the Kenai Peninsula in the early afternoon. The drive had been long, but the sight of the dense forests and majestic mountains made it worthwhile. They found a secluded spot near a small river to set up camp. The area was known for its stunning views and abundant wildlife. They pitched their tents, set up a small fire pit, and shared stories about their adventures. The day was peaceful. Mark tried his hand at fishing while Julia and Lisa explored the nearby trails, collecting wildflowers and taking pictures. Ben kept busy chopping wood for the campfire. As the sun set, the group gathered around the fire, enjoying roasted marshmallows and discussing their plans for the next day. Laughter echoed through the forest, but they made a critical mistake in their excitement. They left food scraps outside their tents, unknowingly inviting danger. Night fell. and the forest became eerily quiet. The only sounds were the crackling of the dying fire and the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. As the friends settled into their tents, they felt excitement and tranquility, unaware of the danger lurking nearby. Around midnight, a loud crashing sound jolted them awake. Lisa was the first to peek out of her tent. Her heart sank as she saw a massive brown bear rummaging through their campsite. The bear, drawn by the scent of food, was tearing through their belongings with alarming force. Lisa quickly alerted the others, and panic set in. Ben grabbed a flashlight to protect the group and cautiously exited his tent. He hoped the light would scare the bear away, but the animal turned its attention to him. The bear growled and charged, knocking Ben to the ground. The bear's claws tore into his side, leaving deep gashes as he tried to shield himself. The others screamed, scrambling to find a way to help. Lisa found the bear spray in their supplies and hurriedly instructed Mark and Julia to stay back. She aimed the spray at the bear with trembling hands, hoping to drive it away. Lisa took a deep breath and aimed the bear spray directly at the massive animal. The mist hit the bear's face, causing it to retreat momentarily. The bear growled and shook its head, agitated but hesitant to advance further. Mark and Julia rushed to Ben, who was still on the ground, groaning in pain. Ben's side was covered in deep gashes, and his breathing was labored, but he was conscious. They carefully dragged him away from the bear, while Lisa held her ground, spraying the animal to keep it at bay. The bear hesitated, growled again, and then lumbered back into the forest. The group stood frozen for a moment, listening to the sound of the bear retreating into the darkness. The tension lingered, but the immediate danger seemed to have passed. Julia quickly assessed Ben's injuries with their limited first aid supplies. His wounds were bleeding heavily, and he showed signs of shock. They applied pressure to the worst cuts and wrapped him in a sleeping bag to keep him warm. The group knew they couldn't stay at the campsite. The bear could return at any moment, and Ben's condition worsened. They decided to pack up as much as they could and leave immediately. Mark and Lisa worked quickly, gathering essentials while Julia stayed with Ben, reassuring him and monitoring his condition. The adrenaline pushed them to act swiftly despite their fear and exhaustion. They decided to head toward the trailhead, which was several miles away. With no cell service and no way to call for help, they fashioned a makeshift stretcher using tent poles and their jackets to carry Ben. The journey was grueling. The uneven terrain and darkness made every step a challenge. Lisa led the way with a flashlight, scanning for any signs of the bear, while Mark and Julia took turns carrying the stretcher. Hours passed as they navigated through the dense forest. The group was exhausted, but they couldn't afford to stop. Ben's condition remained critical, and they knew they had to reach safety before his injuries worsened. The thought of the bear stalking them from the shadows added to their anxiety, but they pressed on, driven by the determination to save their friend. As dawn broke, the group finally reached the trailhead where they flagged down a passing vehicle. The driver immediately called for emergency services, and within minutes an ambulance arrived to transport Ben to the nearest hospital. The group collapsed in relief, knowing they had survived the night. At the hospital, doctors worked to stabilize Ben. He required stitches and treatment for blood loss, but was expected to recover fully after several weeks of rest. The incident was reported to park authorities, who commended the group for their quick thinking and bravery. The site was temporarily closed to investigate the bear's behavior and ensure the safety of future visitors. The experience left the friends shaken, but grateful to be alive. They vowed never to underestimate the dangers of the wilderness again, and hoped their story would remind others of the importance of proper preparation and respect for wildlife. On September 18, 2023, Eric Miller, a 35-year-old environmentalist from Boulder, Colorado, embarked on a solo hike in the breathtaking Rocky Mountains. Eric was no stranger to the outdoors. A passionate advocate for conservation, he spent his weekends exploring trails, collecting data for local wildlife studies, and promoting ecotourism in his community. His dedication to preserving nature earned him respect among environmental groups, but he preferred solitude, finding peace in the unspoiled wilderness. This particular hike was intended to be a personal retreat. Eric had recently completed a major project on sustainable forestry and wanted to reconnect with the environment he worked so hard to protect. Equipped with his whistle, first aid kit, and bear spray, Eric felt prepared for anything the rugged terrain might throw at him. He chose a remote trail near Estes Park, known for its scenic views and abundant wildlife, including deer, elk, and the occasional black or grizzly bear. The morning was crisp and clear as Eric set off, his boots crunching against the gravel path. Towering pines lined the trail, their needles glistening with dew. Eric paused frequently to admire the sights, jotting notes in his field journal about the flora and fauna he encountered. He was thrilled to spot a family of marmots basking on a sunlit rock. As the hours passed, he climbed higher, the air thinning and the views growing more spectacular. Around noon, Eric reached a narrow section of the trail bordered on one side by a steep incline and on the other by dense undergrowth. Here, he spotted fresh bear tracks in the dirt. His heart quickened, but he reminded himself to stay calm. Bears were common in the Rockies, and encounters were usually harmless if proper precautions were taken. He continued walking, his senses heightened. Suddenly, the undergrowth rustled. A large grizzly bear emerged, its dark eyes locking onto Eric. Startled, the bear stood on its hind legs, towering over him. Eric froze, recalling the advice he had given others. Avoid sudden movements and don't run. Slowly, he backed away, hoping to de-escalate the situation. But the bear, feeling threatened, let out a roar and charged. Eric's instincts kicked in. He turned and scrambled toward a nearby tree, hoping to climb to safety. His boots slipped on the loose soil, and before he could gain much height, the bear swiped at him with its powerful claws. Eric was knocked to the ground, the force leaving him dazed as the bear lunged again, raking its claws across his back and legs. Pain shot through his body as he tried to crawl away, his breathing shallow and rapid. Eric reached for the whistle hanging from his backpack strap despite his injuries. He blew it repeatedly, the piercing sound cutting through the forest. The bear hesitated, distracted by the noise, giving Eric a brief moment to assess his situation. He was bleeding heavily, but his mind raced with survival strategies. As the bear growled and circled back, Eric continued to blow the whistle, praying someone would hear him. The wilderness around him felt vast and isolating, the trees seeming to close in as the bear prepared for another attack. Eric's whistle continued to echo through the forest as he clutched his bleeding wounds, struggling to remain conscious. The bear, momentarily distracted, growled and stepped back, its ears twitching as it scanned the surroundings. Eric knew this was his only chance. He crawled toward the nearest tree trunk, each movement sending searing pain through his back and legs. Blood seeped from the deep gashes along his legs and back, leaving a dark trail on the forest floor. As the bear lowered its head to charge again, loud shouts and the clatter of approaching footsteps broke through the tension. A group of nearby hikers, alerted by Eric's whistle, appeared on the trail, armed with sticks and making as much noise as possible. The bear paused, clearly uneasy about the growing commotion. The hikers banged their equipment together and yelled, forcing the animal to retreat further into the underbrush. After a few tense moments, it disappeared entirely into the dense forest. Relief swept over the hikers as they rushed to Eric's side. His shirt was torn, revealing the jagged wounds on his back, and his legs were swollen and bruised from the mauling. One of the hikers, a former medic, quickly assessed his injuries, using a spare shirt to apply pressure to the worst of the bleeding. Another hiker radioed for help using an emergency transceiver, providing their location to rescue teams. Eric's breathing was shallow, but he remained conscious, his determination to survive evident despite the pain. The hikers worked together to make him comfortable while waiting for rescue. After nearly an hour, the sound of helicopter blades cutting through the air signaled the arrival of the rescue team. A paramedic was lowered to the ground, stabilizing Eric and preparing him for airlift. He was pale and weak from blood loss, but his vital signs were stable enough for transport. The team carefully secured him onto a stretcher and hoisted him into the helicopter. Eric was flown to a hospital in Denver, where a team of surgeons worked to repair the damage caused by the attack. Doctors closed multiple deep wounds on his back and legs and treated him for severe blood loss. The road to recovery was long and challenging. Physical therapy became a crucial part of his rehabilitation, as the bear's claws had torn through muscle and tissue, leaving him with limited mobility for months. Despite the trauma, Eric's spirit remained unbroken. From his hospital bed, he began drafting plans to raise awareness about bear safety in hiking areas. He collaborated with local authorities to develop educational programs for hikers, emphasizing the importance of proper precautions and respecting wildlife. The incident sparked significant changes in the park's safety policies. Rangers installed more warning signs on trails known for bear activity and increased patrols during peak hiking seasons. They also held workshops on using bear spray and understanding animal behavior to prevent similar encounters. Eric's story became a symbol of resilience and a reminder of nature's unpredictability. Though scarred physically and emotionally, he chose to use his experience to educate others, ensuring that his ordeal would serve a greater purpose. The hikers who saved him remained in touch, their bond forged by the harrowing events of that day. Together, they shared their story, inspiring countless others to approach the wilderness cautiously and respectfully. In August 2023, Emma and Chris, a married couple from Seattle, embarked on a much-anticipated hiking trip in the Montana wilderness. In their mid-30s, they shared a passion for exploring remote trails and immersing themselves in nature. Emma worked as a graphic designer, while Chris was a teacher. Despite their busy lives, they often made time for weekend getaways, cherishing the peace and beauty of the outdoors. Their latest adventure was meant to be a serene escape from the hustle of city life. The couple chose a trail near a national park in northwestern Montana, known for its breathtaking views of rugged mountains, dense forests, and sparkling rivers. The path was relatively isolated and favored by experienced hikers seeking solitude. Emma and Chris thoroughly researched the trail and packed bear spray, whistles, and a first aid kit to ensure they were prepared for potential wildlife encounters. Though they knew the region's reputation for bear activity, they felt confident in their precautions. On their second day, the couple reached a stunning riverbank surrounded by vibrant wildflowers. They decided to take a break and capture the scenery. Chris set up his camera on a tripod, while Emma wandered a few feet away, marveling at the crystal-clear water. The air was filled with the gentle sound of flowing water and the occasional chirp of birds. It was everything they had hoped for, peaceful and picturesque. They didn't know that a grizzly bear was feeding nearby, hidden by the thick undergrowth along the riverbank. The bear had been startled by their movements and sounds. As Emma approached a cluster of wildflowers for a better photo, the bear emerged from the brush, its massive form suddenly visible. At first, it paused, observing them with wary eyes, but within moments, it charged. Chris yelled to Emma as the bear's thundering steps closed the distance. The couple tried to retreat, but were trapped in a narrow trail bordered by steep, rocky slopes. The bear was relentless, and within seconds it reached Emma, knocking her to the ground. She screamed as the bear swiped at her, leaving deep gashes on her shoulder and back. Desperate to save her, Chris grabbed his walking stick and struck the bear repeatedly. Undeterred by Chris's efforts, the bear focused on Emma, who lay defenseless on the ground. Her arms and legs bore fresh wounds as she tried to shield herself from the powerful swipes. Chris continued to strike the bear, shouting and using everything he could to distract it. After what felt like an eternity, the bear finally stopped its attack, its ears flicking at a sound in the distance. With a low growl, it retreated into the woods, leaving the couple shaken and severely injured. Emma lay on the rocky trail, trembling from pain and fear. Chris dropped his walking stick and rushed to her side. Blood stained her jacket and pants, and her breathing was shallow. He quickly checked her injuries. Emma had deep claw marks on her back and shoulder, along with puncture wounds on her arms and legs. Despite her pain, she managed to whisper that she could move, though every breath seemed to strain her body. Chris knew they had to act fast. The bear could return at any moment and were far from help. He wrapped Emma's wounds with bandages from their first aid kit, using strips of clothing to apply pressure to slow the bleeding. He helped her to her feet with great effort, supporting her weight as they moved slowly down the trail. Every step was agonizing for Emma, but she gritted her teeth and focused on moving forward. The trail, which had seemed beautiful and serene hours earlier, now felt endless and treacherous. Chris constantly glanced behind them, his ears straining for any sound that might signal the bear's return. Emma leaned heavily on him, her face pale and her strength fading. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the forest, and the temperature dropped rapidly. They heard voices in the distance after nearly an hour of slow progress. A group of hikers appeared around a bend, their headlamps cutting through the growing darkness. The group froze at the sight of Emma's bloodied figure, but Chris quickly explained what had happened. The hikers sprang into action, offering their jackets to keep Emma warm and helping to stabilize her wounds further. One of the hikers had a satellite phone and immediately called for help. The group decided to stay together, forming a protective circle around Emma and Chris as they waited. Every rustle in the bushes made their hearts race, but the bear did not return. The wait felt like an eternity, but eventually the sound of a helicopter broke the silence. Search and rescue personnel arrived, and Emma was carefully lifted onto a stretcher. The helicopter flew them to the nearest hospital, where Emma underwent hours of surgery to treat her wounds. Doctors were amazed at her resilience, noting that she was lucky to be alive. Though physically unhurt, Chris carried the emotional weight of the ordeal, staying by Emma's side throughout her recovery. The attack left both of them shaken, but it also raised awareness of the dangers of hiking in bear territory. Park officials reviewed the incident and implemented stricter guidelines for hikers, including enhanced safety measures and more prominent warnings about wildlife encounters. Emma and Chris later shared their story with local media, hoping to educate others about the importance of preparation and respect for nature. Emma's injuries included multiple deep gashes and puncture wounds, requiring extensive treatment, but she ultimately made a full recovery. Though the memories of the attack will remain with them forever, Emma and Chris choose to focus on their survival and the lessons they have learned in the wilderness.